Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to reintroduce to you now. Mike and Corrie-Beth Lipowski are returning guests on our show. Be sure to check out their first appearance on episode 507 of Boundless Body Radio. Mike and Corrie-Beth Lipowski are the owners of the PURE PHYSIQUE fitness franchise, which Mike opened in 2007. A few years later, Corrie-Beth, who was a client at the time, underwent her own transformation following Pure's time and fitness model and wound up losing over 30 pounds after years of unsuccessful dieting and exercise. Mike broke his personal rule of never date a client for the first and only time in his career, thank goodness, and the two were married. Corrie-Beth soon left her teaching career to join Mike in a fitness career. Together with an amazing team, Pure has since grown into a fitness studio franchise and an internationally renowned coaching program. They are the hosts of the awesome That Fitness Couple podcast, which is one of my absolute favorite podcasts. I love their show. In each episode of That Fitness Couple, they share the lessons they've learned on the way to achieving a healthy hormonal balance, high energy, mental clarity, peace, and a lean, strong body. They are also joined by top professionals and experts in these areas to help you achieve your best health. Mike and Corrie-Beth Lipowski, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you back to Boundless Body Radio.
We're so excited
Pumped to be back, man.
So glad to have you guys. I was telling you off air, we've only hung out and done a few podcasts together, but like seriously, I feel like we're like super good friends. Yeah, definitely would love to hang out with you guys one day. So I'm wondering if you guys, had followed my hacked Instagram account and had ended up making any money from the scammy crypto scheme stuff. I feel like if you guys made any money on my hacked account, I'm owed a % commission because it was my image that was selling that. I'm just wondering if you guys collected any of that.
Well, thankfully, I actually had crypto prior to that coming out. So no, I did not move forward with it. I said, Casey, I already got an account, bro. I don't need you to sell me crypto.
I immediately knew it was the fake Casey. And I was like, if this is the real Casey, it would have been a phone call. So I just reported you to the authorities and then they got scared and ran away.
Perfect. Yeah, it was such a bummer. I had to go back and like refollow all the things I was trying to follow before. And everybody's like, why are you following me? You were just following me. No, it's my old account, unfortunately. As I was saying, it's so great to see you guys. You do great work on your podcast. I love the episode that you did with Callie Means. Tell us about that experience. That's pretty cool.
It was amazing. Like when Micah got that email that we had booked Kelly Means, he was just like, no way. And I was like, what way? And then when he explained, I was like, oh my gosh, this is epic. And I think it was a week later, Callie was on Tucker Carlson and all these big news media networks. So I was like, wow, great job, Mike. It was such a fun conversation with someone who is so intelligent and bright. And I love that he is using his gifts for good, to literally be able to tap into $100 million of FSA and HSA funds. So for the listener, that's your flexible spending account or your health savings account you would typically have through a corporate job to actually be able to use those pre-tax dollars for health and not just, medications and doctor's visits. That's pretty epic.
What I enjoyed most about that conversation, though, is that he's actually taking this health issue and putting it on the political stage. And we have not really ever seen this before. I mean, with RFK, you definitely have heard over the years, his fighting for children's health and doing all of these wonderful things to try to make for a better, healthier society. But that was about like the extent of where it went politically. And then to see somebody like Callie, who's been in the trenches in DC, step up and say, you know what, we're going to do something more than what's been done before, and is actually taking it and making it a platform. And I think it's amazing because this is where it has to go. Up to this point, it's just been people like us fighting for what we believe is the way that we should be living, and not that we're trying to impart on people how they should be living, but what we're saying is we don't like what's been imparted on us in terms of the way we're supposed to eat, the choices that we have available to us. And I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole when you look at things like, WIC and welfare, with the things that they have to spend their money on, the types of food are not healthy foods. And so to see somebody going this political route of saying, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on, whether you're vegetarian or carnivore, we have to do better. And we have to make make these things more available to people. So to me, it was just an amazing experience to have somebody like that to hear what's going on, and the way that he's approaching it is just so unique.
Yeah, that's great. So I listened to your interview. You guys did a great job. I am completely apolitical. Like if Tucker Carlson walked by me right now, I would not know who he was. I just don't follow it. I don't get into it. I thought the episode that he did on Tucker Carlson was very good, and I thought it was bipartisan. I didn't think it was leaning one side or the other. It was just facts about what was going on. I shared it around with people, and I definitely shared it with a few of the wrong people that had like feedback that I was really surprised about, frankly, if they were not on the same plane as Tucker Carlson. But anyway, how bad things really are in the health space. Yeah, I love the episode again that you guys did, and also with Tucker Carlson. I thought that was a great one and very shareable for most people, most of my friends.
There's always some outliers that get angry about everything. So you just gotta keep moving on.
Yep. Exactly. Well, before we get into our topic today, I do wanted to ask you about an update that you guys have. You are expanding and on the move. That's pretty cool. Tell us about what you have going on.
Yeah, so we took our flagship studio that we were in for 17 years, and we actually expanded to a new state-of-the-art, super modern space with brand new Nautilus One equipment. And it's just been such an incredible transformation just to see clients walk in and having a mix of like, oh my gosh, this feels so good. Like our studio always felt good, but it's kind of like a new car. Or when you reorganize your house or a room, like it feels good to be in it. And we love making people feel good, but to know they feel good just even walking into the space. Some people feel like they're at the spa, and I'm like, okay, well then we got to start the workout because you're not going to feel that way in a second. But I think the positive feedback that has come from our staff as well as our clients, it's really confirmed that this was the right move for us to again have more space.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, do you guys, are you actually living at the new location or near the new location now?
Yeah, it's up and running. It's been up and running for about 8 weeks.
Yeah, about 8 weeks now, and it's been awesome. Probably the toughest part for Corrie-Beth and I is that when we go in there, it's nicer than our home, and so now, we go into the bathroom at the studio, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is like being at the Ritz, and then we come home and like, how are we not on the same level as our studio now?
It's how much we love our clients. We wanted them to have the nicest things.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
good for you. Well, if it was up to Corrie-Beth, I think you guys would be living out in the sticks in the middle of nowhere anyway, right?
You've listened to enough of our episodes to know that
it's one of my favorites.
One of us is crunchy and one of us is not.
Just give me a well and then like a lean-to. Like we will be fine and totally survive.
That's great. I love that. Okay, awesome. As I was mulling over what to chat about today, it's kind of cool when I'm talking to you guys. Mike, you're super smart, very scientifically minded. Corrie-Beth, your background as a teacher, you can explain things super well. You have great chemistry. It's part of the reason why I love your podcast. This summer, I did a nutrition seminar series in my neighborhood where I was teaching a series of different concepts to people that were showing up. It was just kind of a free thing. And, we covered things like the calories in, calories out theory of, weight loss. We covered macronutrients, what different macronutrients do. We had basic lessons about, titled The Big Fat Surprise, why we think fat is bad for us, and cholesterol, and all these different things. It's something that I had done 5 years ago, but I realized that as I was like preparing to do this again, there's so many new topics or topics that were kind of up and coming then that I didn't really talk about that I was able to expand on today. So what I should have done is done this before I did all that, because you guys could have written my lesson plan for me. That would have been great, saved me some work. But they're all done and they're all written and everything. What I wanted to do today is maybe introduce a few of the lessons that I created that were new this time and see what your thoughts would be on those particular lessons, how you would maybe explain it to people. And if nothing else, I'll just save it next year when I do it again. I'll remember everything that you said and forget all the stupid stuff that I said. What do you guys think?
Let's do it.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to start with lesson 13. So this was last week I did this episode. I'm going to tell you the lesson. And again, we can just riff off of what you guys think and how you'd explain this to somebody. The name of the lesson is called Moderation in Everything. Are you a moderator or an abstainer?
Well, this is always a hot topic, because I'm going to say that the majority of people are not moderators, but they don't know that they're not moderators. And the reason why I personally say that is because we have so many conversations with people, just like you do. Many of our clients, growing up, they were taught, everything in moderation, everything in moderation. And yet we know that there are a multitude of things that you would never be able to do in moderation, especially if there was any form of addiction. And what always makes this a difficult topic to broach with people is that we're talking about food. We're not talking about drugs. We're not talking about alcohol. Debatable. You could say that many foods are drugs these days, especially the way that they are created. But you're trying to help people to understand that there are things that just don't belong on your plate. There are things that just do not belong in your refrigerator. And it's hard getting that message across to people. But yet, the people who get it, who finally accept that there are things that they just should be abstaining from, I feel like those people have a major breakthrough. And it's just always interesting to me because you know, if we're told to restrict something, right? What is like our initial visceral reaction to that? Like, no, you're not going to tell me to restrict. I have the freedom to do whatever I want. And what I always find fascinating around this particular conversation is that the people who learn to abstain from those things which are not serving their health always are the ones that come out and say, I feel like I'm free. They finally come around and say, I feel like I have more freedom. And they recognize that there is plenty available to them that allows them to have food freedom. I mean, food freedom is not just I'm free to do whatever I want. It's being free from the clutches of food. It's being free from feeling as if, every time you walk by the pantry, there's a box or a bag of something in there that's calling your name. To me, that is not freedom. That's being a prisoner.
Yeah, it's funny. You stated this topic, and yes, Mike is the moderator. I do tend to have to abstain from things. I would definitely categorize
Really? I
myself
would
as.
have guessed the opposite. That's funny.
Oh,
Sorry,
really?
sorry to interrupt. I would have guessed the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, he has great discipline, which is why I think he can moderate me. I took that identity as like, I have a sweet tooth. I love when people are like, my dad had a sweet tooth and I have a sweet tooth. And I'm like, sweet teeth are not genetic, but fine. Nature nurture argument. Like we could go there. And I think the best way to help people see it is always, it's like this. And when we look at food, like you're talking about, someone who loves Oreos or Chips Ahoy or things, again, that are not going to serve us on our journey, we almost have to view it like going to the zoo. There's some animals at that zoo that are dangerous, and there's others that are totally safe. And I think helping people to understand, like, if these things you don't have control over exist in your space, like, those can be dangerous for your goal. And then maybe, like koala bears, I think that maybe they can be a little bit vicious, but like generally they're safe. So it's almost like if being at a zoo, identifying like what is dangerous to me and what is not dangerous to me. Like you wouldn't go into the lion den because that's a dangerous place to go. And I think that that's the same thing. Like I will just abstain from ice cream because ice cream for me can be a slippery slope. Homemade cookies, chocolate chip cookies, slippery slope. Those are more my danger foods. I'm not gonna go into the bear cage, the lion den. I'm not gonna go hang out with kangaroos. Like they're probably gonna gut punch me in my stomach. I would just stay away from those completely. And I think just helping people see like, oh, that makes sense. Like, yeah, those things are things that could really lead to my demise or lead me down this into this dangerous place. Don't even play with that. Whereas there's all these other choices over here. And I think always helping people to see like you don't have to give something up without replacing it with something else. We had one client who was so addicted to like sugar and coffee. And it was just like, why don't we try another drink? Or someone else like had to have a snack at 3 o'clock. I'm like, why don't we replace it with a cup of tea? We can always like swap things out for safer things. So back to the zoo example, like don't go in the bear cage, but you can go hang out with the fish. Like they're perfectly safe. Like you could have a nice time in there. It'll be good.
I like how when we had interviewed Dr. Lisa Wiedemann, who as well, I love how she categorized it in that she had her circle. She talked about the green circle and the yellow circle and the red circle, and how all the foods in the green circle, it's that green light. You are absolutely good to go. Don't even concern yourself with it. Just move on those foods. Then you have those ones that are in the yellow circle. And those are the ones that, maybe you do need to be just conscientious, or those are the foods that if you're going out to eat where it's moderated for you, then you might be okay consuming those foods. So if I went to a restaurant and really bacon doesn't fall into my yellow category, but if bacon fell into my yellow category, the perfect time to eat that would be at a restaurant where they're only going to give me 2 or 3 slices of bacon on my burger. And then there's that red category where it's, these are just the off limits foods. Like, these are the foods that you should abstain from. So we can talk generally about being an abstainer and a moderator, or we can get more granular and say, hey, there are certain foods that we should abstain from, but there are other ones that maybe we can moderate if we approach it intelligently.
Yeah, that's very well said. I like thinking about it in that way. And I wonder, Mike, maybe more as a moderator, you might have a wider circle in the middle than somebody like Corrie-Beth or myself, where it's like, is fruit, for example, is fruit bad? Like, I'm never going to tell anybody that fruit is bad. I just know when I consume it, what happens after that. There's a consequence that leads me down a path that I don't want to be on. I get really hungry, and I just, my cravings go way up for crap that I never usually want. Is that a fair way to say it, Corrie-Beth? Would you kind of agree with that?
I completely agree. I always say to clients, know thyself, know which foods don't make you feel good or lead you down this path of old behaviors or destructive behaviors. And I just say, abstaining from that all the way is is honestly like the most helpful thing when we're trying to help, reach a fitness goal. Sometimes it's hard to tell a client that, like, you have to be done with it, which is why I never tell anybody, like, you have to give this up. But I think it's asking questions around it, like, hey, how do we feel when we do this? What happens after that? Where does this lead you to? Where they're having that realization, like, wow, like, I probably shouldn't eat Dum Dum Pops, like, I probably shouldn't have an ice pop at night. I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's your idea. It's not mine.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing that we kind of talked about, as I wanted to approach it and kind of explain it to people, is explain a lot of what Callie says about the cigarette companies that took over the food companies and bought those all out. But that the 5A model of addiction, that the age, you focus on the young, you make things really available, you make things really affordable, you advertise a ton, and then you put tons of additives and addictive chemicals in the food. And to realize that they did that with cigarettes very successfully. We had vending machines of cigarettes that were available everywhere. They were inexpensive, advertising and commercials and all over the place. And it wasn't just like, these are the reasons why smoking is good for you. It was more advertising, like, look at how cool that woman is who's smoking in this sweet dress and she's killing it at work or whatever. They just took that exact same model and flipped it over to sugar and food. And it's like, walk through the grocery store and marvel at every aisle has a cereal company in there, and they all have cartoon characters, or they're cartoon characters that already were, and now they're selling all the food items. Like, it's nuts. But like, you have to see that, and once you see it, you can't unsee it at that point. But you have to realize they're making these foods super addictive on purpose for a reason, and that's to make a lot of money.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you're bringing this up. I literally had this conversation not more than, I don't know, 3 hours ago with a client who, she's just starting to come to some of these realizations that even in the choices that she's trying to make that she believes are the right choices, she in many ways is still choosing the wrong foods. But it's not her fault. It's not most consumers' fault, because most consumers are not coming with the passion for learning and understanding this stuff as maybe the three of us do. But what they are passionate about is being healthy and having their family be healthy. And so what do? They go to the supermarket, and every single month, if not every week, there is a new item that hits the shelf that is marketed as being healthy. And why would, like, who would know any better? Who would know any better unless they are a person that takes the time to research and study what half the ingredients in there actually do to your body? So you don't know because it's marketed as being healthy, but it's not healthy.
Mm.
And it's such a difficult thing to navigate. She had brought up to me, she was watching some of our onboarding videos. She said, the most interesting thing was how you said that animals don't have to be taught what to eat.
Mm.
You don't go into the wilderness and have to, you don't have to educate a lion on how a lion's supposed to eat. You don't have to educate a cow on how a cow is supposed to eat. But humans, you do. because there are so many options available. And to your point, what you brought up about the cigarette companies, they took the scientists over there as soon as there was a pushback on cigarettes. They move them over here to the food industry and they say, go do the same thing. Make foods as enticing and as addictive as you possibly can. And there's a reason why Lay's potato chips tells you you can't eat just one, because you physically cannot. It is a drug created by drug makers. And the moment that hits your lips and you have that explosion in your brain and that dopamine is hitting you hard, I mean, of course it's going to be difficult. But the problem is now the same thing is being done in quote health foods. So now you have all these healthy foods that taste just as good as, their counterparts. And people don't understand why they're still having such challenges losing body fat, why they have so much gut disruption, why they're suffering from all of these mental health issues, because it's a food problem. And it's hard getting that message across, and it's getting more and more difficult to just navigate these waters for people.
Yeah, I would say for me, the reason I left teaching was seeing the state provided breakfast for a underprivileged district in lower New York, right by the New York City, feed kids animal crackers and apple juice. And then the kids would misbehave. And then the kids would get punished and miss learning. And I'm like, did nobody else see this pattern here? Like, you're literally pumping these kids with 50 grams of sugar. They're acting out and then you're punishing them. Like, you did that over here. And that for me was like the last straw. I'm like, I literally can't do this anymore. Thank God met Mike. We started our journey. I started my transformation journey. I think a lot of this does begin young. Unfortunately, like you said, there's a lot of cartoon characters and bright colors and all the things that are used to attract kids to it. But one of the lessons that we've ingrained in our children, who are 10 and 7 years old, have been things like protein makes you strong and sugar makes you sick. And so they identify food. So like, that's going to make me strong and that's not going to make me strong. In fact, Mike sits at the table. He's like, that's going to make you weak. If it's not protein, it's going to make you weak. I always say to the kids too, like, if it's free, it's not for me. There's like free donut days and free Burger King days and all these free things that our government is like, look, it's free. You probably don't want it if it's free. Like, what business would give away something literally for free with no back, I would say like a back reason? Like, what is like there's a nefarious reason that they're doing it.
Free flu shots.
I wasn't going to go
Just
there,
go
but
to
we can.
Walgreens.
Yeah.
What about when they were giving away free donuts with COVID
Seriously.
shots? I'm like, what
Right.
the hell is going on? And I even say to our kids too, like, if it's advertised on television, like, there's enough money behind that company to create an advertisement to make you eat it to make more money. When have you seen eggs advertised in a commercial, or steak, or apples, right? Like, we're not advertising real foods that lived and breathed and grew. We're advertising Chips Ahoy and Oreos and Lunchables and mouthfuls and all this trash that's, packed and loaded with preservatives. Like, if you see it on television, it's probably not something you should put in your body. And our kids are like, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that input. I think that's a really good way to think about it. We used, I believe it was the Uncope sugar addiction kind of quiz that I gave people, and just had people like think to themselves about some of the questions. And the one that really stood out to me that kind of told me that I'm more of an abstainer is along the lines of like, in the past year, have you had more of a certain food than you thought you wanted? And I think back, like, if I ever deviate and I have a little bit of something, and then all of a sudden I've had way more than I ever wanted, and that's a good indicator for me that it's just easier for me to, you're right. You think that sounds restrictive. This is around, I know is my food and what I know is not my food. It makes things so much easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like that way of assessing though. Did I consume something that I didn't intend to have as much of it? Because that makes such a big difference. And I think that there's just a certain level of mindfulness or realization around that. Because I think that's also part of the issue is, the reason why people have a difficult time associating themselves as an abstainer is because they don't see things through that lens that you just described. They don't think that they unintentionally had more of something that maybe they knew they shouldn't, or they really know is not good for them. but we don't take the time to think about it. So I think just being so thoughtful around the way that you eat and the foods that you're consuming is huge.
Well, people, I think, don't have mental capacity to think about that, because what are you thinking about during a day? It's like, I got to get to work. I got to get the kids to school. Like, I got to meet these deadlines. I got to pay my bills. I got to get home. Shoot, like, we got to put dinner on the table. And for a lot of people, like, I don't blame them. It's the most convenient thing. It's the easiest thing. It's like, oh, I saw those lean cuisines on TV. Like, let me get those. I could just pop them in the microwave. Like, it's so easy. Whereas we're not educating on nutrition in our American school system. We're also not educating on finances in our American school system. So those are two huge gaps that either help people to be sick or not, or successful and not. And so it's the path of least resistance. I mean, in nature, that's the path water takes. And so as humans, we're natural in the way that, like, we're just going to take the path of least resistance. I don't have the capacity to think. No one showed me how easy it is to fry at 5 eggs, or told me I can have that as a complete dinner. Like, that's cool to do. It's, let me just do this thing that I saw on TV, and it's just going to be easier. Plus, too, you see so much of it on TV shows. Like, a lot of our cultural blueprints that we subconsciously create are things that we see in our environment. So again, when you're hanging around friends that are just like, oh my gosh, like, I just need a glass of wine, you're going to feel like you need a glass of wine. When you have friends or coworkers that are just like, oh my gosh, Friday has to be pizza night, like, I just cannot cook. You get home, and I think that we default a lot to convenience because it's what other people are doing, or it's what we've seen in our culture or our environment. No one is out there except for Boundless Body Radio. So make sure you tune in, guys. But no one is out there saying, like, this is simple, this is easy, this is cheap, you can do this.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to think about it. And I've got a $20 check coming your way for the plug. Thank you very much. Love the advertising. Yeah, don't spend it all in place. Okay, awesome. That was a great way to really love the way you guys are thinking about these things. This is now lesson number 11. This is one that I had to tell people, like, this is going to get a little weird. You're going to look at me like I've got a second head growing off my shoulders. But the title of this lesson number 11, the most delicious poison, detoxifying plants.
Most delicious poison, detoxifying plants.
So the title is actually taken from a book. Dr. Chafee recommended it, and it's called The Most Delicious Poison. So I probably owe that guy a commission. But yeah, like, and it's all about, it has nothing really to do with nutrition. It's more about, like, what plants do in nature, how they fight against each other, how they compete, how they cooperate in certain instances, and how they keep themselves from being eaten. And so the idea of the lesson was to say that, like, plants have toxins. This is what you can do to choose if you want to eat them, and things to be thinking about, or if you don't want to eat them, if that's a viable option or not.
This is always one of those taboo topics, right? When you start to introduce this to people for the first time, because going back to our conditioning and our growing up, we've been told that vegetables are good for you, that we should be consuming these. And no one had ever looked any deeper to find out, well, could these also be harming us in any way? It's easy to look at the makeup of a food and delineate, well, there's this much vitamin A, there's this much vitamin B and C, there's these minerals, and to look at that food and say, okay, this looks like it should be really good for me. But not looking at, is there anything else in that food that could counteract all of those vitamins and minerals that you're supposedly getting from it. And this is where that topic of anti-nutrients comes in, right? I mean, we can talk about all the different types of plant foods and grains, which have this phytic acid, right? Phytates, where there are these anti-nutrient properties where you are consuming this food, and for everything that you're getting, you are leaching that much more from your body. So where's the value in that? There is none. But it's hard to work our minds past this idea that this supposed health food could be doing that to me. And it's always a big realization for people. I mean, there's always two camps here, right? There's the person that says, Casey, thank you. I have hated vegetables my entire life. You're telling me that I have a license not to eat vegetables? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. You are my savior. Thank you so much. I'm in your program forever. Okay. And I'm forever in your debt. And then you have the other person who it's part of everything that they do. And I'm not talking vegetarians either. I'm talking about people who, cooking, right? When you cook a meal, you have to have variety within that meal. You have to have all the colors and the different tastes and all of these things. So all of your culinary people are like, wait a second. You mean to tell me all these vegetables that I'm cooking up and making delicious are not good for me? Convince me of this.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to actually show them that it is in the textbooks. We've known this for a long time. You can go on the NIH's website and actually find a list of all the toxins that you find in foods. And ironically, all the foods are plant foods, all of them. So it's a difficult conversation, but I do think it's one that more people need to have. And when people start to recognize that these plant foods could be the reason for some of their autoimmune issues, and they just do nothing else, they take that food out and those issues begin to clear up. I mean, that to me is always going to be the primary convincer, because people just want to feel great at the end of the day, right? So if you could start to point them in a direction, and I always like how Corrie-Beth puts it, let them have the idea. It's more about the suggestion of hey, did you ever consider trying this? What do you think about it? Or why don't you give it a try and report to me what happens or doesn't happen?
Well, one of the first questions I always ask in an intake is, do you get bloated? I want to know if we're dealing with bloating, because majority of people do have bloating. Either they don't realize they're bloated, or they're bloated and they don't realize it's not normal to be bloated. I mean, that was the story of my life until like 15 years ago. Like, I was bloated 24/7, 365. Would literally leave my teaching job and not be able to rebutton my dress pants because I was so bloated. So I think it's asking that first, talking about bowel movements and things like that. We do know that vegetables and salads bloat us. And most people are like, oh, that's an interesting concept. So I think it's first like pointing out a little bit of education and information. Our primary goal then after that is really just to increase people's protein, in our programs. And then the vegetable talk really comes after. I kind of save that for later. I think if you lead with that, people will be like, you guys are crazy. I don't want to coach with you. I don't want to come to your gym. And I think just a couple of things that are really interesting. I'm just kind of throwing out zingers to people. Like, most of the vegetables you see are man-made. They're like, wait, what? Like broccoli is man-made, cauliflower is man-made. Like, these never existed in any ancient Egyptian set of hieroglyphics or the Last Supper. Like, there was not a pot of green beans or asparagus. Let's just be honest. Like, there was meat, there was unleavened bread, and there was olive oil and wine. That's pretty much all we had, which is really interesting when you start to think about it. And I think what struck me most recently, where we were cutting up a seedless watermelon, and our kids freaked out when they saw a black seed in the watermelon. Now, I don't know about you, Casey, but I remember eating big, things of watermelon growing up and just spitting out all the black seeds. And then you would accidentally swallow one and be like, oh my God, a watermelon is going to grow in my stomach. Like all these silly, like, tall tales we tell ourselves. But our kids had never seen a black watermelon seed, because what do we get at the supermarket? Seedless watermelons. And so when I explained, well, watermelons have to have seeds, because how are you going to get more watermelon if there's no DNA seed in order to plant more? And they were like, wait, what? Like, this is man-made? And then they were eating grapes and they were like, do grapes have pits? And I was like, natural grapes do have pits, because how are you going to grow more grapes? We have seedless grapes, and we don't think about these things in our everyday regular life. Now, I'm not here to demonize fruit. I love a good, organic apple from time to time, which I know is probably not, there's like 6,500 varieties of apple, but at one point there was only one, right? So we created all these varieties of apples. But I think it's just helping people to say, like, how does this food make you feel? And especially with vegetables, knowing how many properties are in them that are just seeking to protect the plant, which creates great discomfort to you, the consumer of that plant. It's like, hey, what if we just cut this out for a day? Like, let's just see how you feel. The client reports back, like, actually, I feel fine, right? Like, I didn't get scurvy. I didn't die. This is crazy. Let's try another like 2 days. Let's just go 3 days, no vegetables. You don't have to give them up for the rest of your life. Let's just kind of experiment here. Day 3, I mean, I went away with 7 women. 3 of us are carnivore, 4 of us were not. And the other 4, just by nature, ate like the 3 of us did. And they were like, holy cow, my bloating is gone. My puffiness is gone. Like, I feel better. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is how you guys feel all the time. Yeah, that's how we live every single day. People, I think, at that point are like, well, you can't really argue with how good someone feels. Okay, take it day by day. Give it another day. If you want to go ahead and have a plate of broccoli, like, go for it. I got so gassy. Okay, well, that's probably like food is a signal, right? It's telling you something. Like, maybe that's not what is working best for your body right now. So what can we eat instead? I think it's just as long as we keep it as an open conversation where we never feel like we're Mike's gonna laugh. I never want people to feel like I'm bullying them into a decision where Mike is like, vegetables are stupid, and that's fine. Like, we have different approaches. And again, like you said, that's the synergy that we have together. But being a teacher, I think that journey of exploration and self-experimentation is so powerful that people will change without even realizing that they've completely changed. And that, I think, is our job, is to empower people with, like, you don't have to do that because it's how you grew up. You can do this because it makes you feel better. And that's cool.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love the way you kind of reframe that and put that onto your clients. I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. You unlocked something out of my long-term memory. I haven't thought about this in forever, but 2 decades ago, I used to live in Brazil, and I remember the first time I bit into a grape and almost broke my freaking tooth. That was terrible. What? Oh, it's like rock hard.
Grape pit. I mean, that's
It-
what's supposed to be great, but welcome to America. We breed seedless grapes. You can never plant any grapes in your backyard, people, because they took the seeds away. But I think is it in the Netherlands or Norway? It's somewhere that some, high up elitists, they store all of the seeds of all of the fruit varieties. And I'm sure if you Google that, it'll probably say it's a conspiracy theory, but it is true. There is a facility where they do house all of the seeds of things, because if we keep creating seedless fruits and vegetables, how the heck are you supposed to grow them and reproduce more fruits? And like, you just can't. It's crazy.
If that one thing doesn't tell you how freaking entitled we are as a species, that is ridiculous. It is so insane. Okay, so as a solution for this one, I kind of set up like two different ideas. The first is, if you want to continue plants, here's some things, continue consuming plants. Here's some things you need to be thinking about. How can you deactivate some of the toxins? Or the other path could be, let's just avoid that whole thing and go for a carnivore diet. Are you going to die if you go on a carnivore diet? Do you guys have thoughts on either one of those?
I think it's great. What I think is always a powerful, like, primary question before those two pathways is, are you bloated and are you having daily bowel movements? Because most people who are not agreeing with plant foods have one or both of those two issues. And I think bringing them first to that understanding of, like, oh shoot, like, I am bloated all the time. Maybe this is something that I want to explore. Like, it's their choice then to continue down those two paths, because I do think that those are two great offerings for people. In fact, I think three is better. We had done a training a long time ago, and they said, don't just tell people chocolate or vanilla, tell them chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. Psychology shows that we like three choices. It makes us feel like we have more freedom. It's not like an either or, like it's like vegetables or carnivore. It could be like vegetables. It could be less vegetables, like less oxalate containing vegetables. And then it could be no vegetables. And then they're like, ooh, I get to choose in this. But I think leading them in with, like, hey, how do you feel? That is a great, like, realization back to them of, like, I don't just have to choose a path. Like, there's a reason I'm choosing a path.
And I think so much of it is really, it's a mental exercise. I mean, you can give people those options, right? And we give three options, but we're very clear that when we provide our clients options, we do it along a spectrum. And that spectrum is, on one end, you have carnivore, as carnivore as carnivore can get. On the other end, you have a more flexible approach, but most people will look at it and say, hey, that looks pretty much like paleo. And then in between, you would have what would be considered animal-based. So high protein, but you still have the fruit in there. You have the honey, maybe more dairy.
Butter.
And
The butter.
but the idea is that I want people to see that the healthiest thing that they could do, the way that they could have the most sustainable nutrition for the rest of their life, is to just simply learn to live along the spectrum. At times, is a person who occasionally has some vegetable, if it's occasional, is it going to be a problem? Probably not, right? It's probably not going to be an issue. But maybe that person realizes that that's not an everyday thing. Maybe that is that, just like in that moderation circle, right? That yellow circle, it's like, it's once in a while. It's when I go out. And then if they can learn though that, there's these things over here, they could have the potential to do this to you, and it might not be a positive thing, then you just simply learn to just steer clear of that. But maybe within that category, being specific about vegetables, like they find that there is one that agrees with them. And they like, I love jalapenos. Right?
Mhm.
I love jalapenos. I love spiciness. So if I go out to eat, am I sitting there going, oh, it's a jalapeno, like I can't have that, that's a vegetable? No, but it's also not an everyday thing for me. So I understand that the bulk of what I need to stay away from is this stuff over here.
It's
And
good.
if this is happening in large amounts and consistently, like, it's going to cause problems. And that's why it's usually so easy to convince somebody or have them convince themselves that maybe these vegetables are not the best thing for me, just by pointing out the bloat, just by pointing out the bowel movements, or by pointing out, hey, do you feel a lessening of joint pain? If it's a person who's dealing with that, those physical responses or non-responses are really what's going to hook people long term. But I do like in the beginning of giving people the option of like, hey, do this over here, but like, let's just pick one thing. Let's pick one or two things that we're consuming. In fact, we had that conversation today with a client. It was, listen, I know you're not ready to go over here, right? Which is carnivore. And she's kind of sitting in that animal base, flexible spectrum, right? She's kind of residing right in the middle. And she knows that she should probably start staying clear of some of those vegetables. So I said, why don't we just narrow it down? Like, let's just narrow it down for now. Same thing with the fruit. I'm like, what are your favorite ones? And so she picked out three. I was like, great. If you're looking for convenience, have those three around. But I think that that's how we have to position it for people is you can't initially just say no. You tell a kid no, what do they want to do? It's like they want to do that thing that you told them no.
That's what happens when Mike tells me no.
That's I mean, we're all big kids at the end of the day, right? And so I feel like that's in terms of positioning it for people, it's like they have to have a choice. And so I like leaving a choice available to them, but I'm going to do my best to make it like the healthiest version of that choice, the least
Yeah.
damaging, and then educate them along the way.
Well, it's funny too. Like he loves jalapenos. I love chimichurri sauce. Like how much do I love chimichurri?
Yeah.
If I could like bathe in a
Good.
vat of chimichurri, I would be so happy with a steak. Like it's got to be a big, nice skirt steak, right? But we'll have clients who will lock themselves in, like you're saying, like, oh my gosh, like I'm not allowed to do that. Or they'll say, because we psych ourselves out, like, oh my gosh, I had chimichurri sauce, which has parsley and like herbs in it on my steak. So now I'm not carnivore anymore. I might as well eat the French fries, right? Like they'll talk themselves out of it with something like that. So like I do think the spectrum is good, flexibility is good, but like you're doing, Casey, like I love that you're literally educating people in your neighborhood because there is no body, like a body of, health or research or nutrition that's doing that for us common folk, like we have to get better educated. And for me, sitting in on the interview Mike set up with Dr. Anthony Chafee, I was like, wait, what? That's the history of vegetables? Like, I'm out.
That's crazy. I know. It's
You know?
crazy. Yeah,
And
you guys make such good points. And again, it's those reframes that and helping your clients decide what they want to do that I think is so important. Yes, we can be carnivore and you'll be perfectly safe. If you do choose to eat a lot of vegetables, detoxify. So cooking and fermenting and soaking. I mean, Corrie-Beth, I remember you had the sourdough bread baking thing going on for a little while. I don't know if you ever did it. I've done that in the past. Like one of my points was like to make this thing safe, you have to soak this for 2 days and like do all this stuff. It's such a pain. If nothing else, like it's such a pain to do all this detoxification if you're getting a lot of it. And the thing would go bad like a day later. Like the bread was good, but it was so much work.
Much work. I literally made 2 loaves and I never made a loaf again.
That's freaking starter is like having a child or something. Like it's so insane, like another pet. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I couldn't stand it. Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate your opinion on that. I've got one more for you. This was the very last one that we did. So we had spent 13 weeks over the course of the summer talking about all the different things about nutrition, what to eat, what not to eat, suggestions. People can make up their minds. We were trying to be as very diet agnostic as possible. This was the very last one. Lesson 14, the final seminar, bringing everything together, where we talked about all the most important stuff that had to do with not eating. What are your thoughts there? Lifestyle things, general health, that kind of stuff. This is right in your wheelhouse.
I'm gonna say that, yeah, it is in our wheelhouse because all of this, at the end of the day, is an inside job. It's as much as we want to point people in the direction of the foods to choose, their approach to their nutrition. At the end of the day, really, it comes down to mindset. It comes down to all the other things that they could be doing to help support this, this path that they're taking. So obviously, exercise plays a major role in that. Not that exercise is going to do anything magical to suddenly transform you and help you drop tons of body fat, but what it does is it's just one of those habits that when you're doing it, you just tend to do the other things better. Meaning when people are exercising, they're more likely to make better food choices. They're more likely to be open to a different approach to nutrition if they think that in conjunction with their exercise, this is going to help elevate their results. They're going to feel better. They're going to look better. So I always find that like exercise is huge because once you have that in place, that opens up greater possibilities and opens people up. And then of course you get into things such as, well, you could speak more on the mindset side of this. So actually I'm just going to leave my side and let you do yours. How about that?
What was the topic again? It's bringing it all together.
Things outside of
That
the
Yeah,
diet.
it was everything to do with, yeah, after we had talked about diet for so long, this was the lesson that was like, I mean, first of all, we talked about not eating, so what fasting was and how to incorporate that if somebody wanted to do that. But then, yes, all the other things like Mike was talking about, like exercise, or, is sunlight a priority, or is sleep or stress, or whatever topics that you feel like would be the other ones that would help like support health in that way.
Got it. Okay. And I just want to be clear that I answered the right question. Are you looking for the subtopics in that, like everything else outside of?
And yeah, anything that you think would be important if you were presenting on kind of lifestyle stuff outside of nutrition.
Yeah, I think, thank you for clarifying. I think like the first is literally your identity. Who are you? And literally just did a elite coaching call with a new client that's actually been around in our program, but really honing in on like, who is she? And realizing that, oftentimes like we can feel lost or overwhelmed or confused. I mean, gosh, there's a whole lot of conflicting information from TikTok to Instagram to Facebook when it comes to health. And I think it's becoming rock solid in our identity. Like I am a mom who puts the health of my family first. I am a woman who prioritizes herself. Like I am a person that always looks for healthy choices. I am somebody that is worthy enough to be cared for. That identity piece I think is so important for us because without that, they're just habits. It's like, who am I? And then really, what am I doing this for? And for me, we just had an interview with another young gym owner out in Arizona where he really liked a training that I did on sales where you get into people's hell. It's understanding the hell if they don't do these things. So we can talk about the subtopics of sleep and hydration, and Mike comes at hydration particularly from such a unique vantage point of people's hell. If you don't drink enough and you become dehydrated or you become sleep deprived, here's the performance you lose. Here's the focus you lose. Like you're not going to be as effective at work. People are like, whoa, 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 hold on. So I think putting those pieces in and explaining like an overview of those topics, sleep, hydration, mindset, meditation. For us, it's faith and reading the Bible. There's these pieces, but I think the overarching thing has got to be like, what is our identity? And what will happen if I don't do these things? Where might my life end up? That for me was such a powerful mental activity to walk through, where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to end up overweight, alone, without Mike. Like, it was not a really positive place to be. And that, I think, is so motivating for people then to start to lock in some of these habits where it's like, oh man, sleep is really important. I think we got to get into people's brains and do a little brainwashing. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, some people's brains have got to be washed. We got to just like clean out some of that old programming and that old BS, their old belief systems about, this is complicated or this is hard. It's just like, but who are you, or who do you want to be? Right. And what are these things that we're doing it for? Then I think we can lock in all of the lifestyle. So I know it was kind of like a roundabout way of answering your question of subtopics, but I think it's the overarching piece that helps people actually implement.
That's where I was hoping that you would go with it exactly there, because, when I said earlier on, it's an inside job. We can talk about all of the other things that are adjacent to the diet, your sleep, your hydration, the exercise, general movement. I mean, all of those things are important. But at the end of the day, what gets a person to do those things? And it comes down to their self-worth. If they feel that they are worthy of it. I find myself, just like anyone else out there, getting into those periods where it's at night, just want to veg out, watch TV, don't do anything, stay up late, and I'll do that. But then I'll come back maybe a night or two later and realize, like, hold on a second, like you're supposed to perform tomorrow. You have, these interviews to do. You're going to be training this class or these clients. You got to run this meeting. And I'm like, I should just go to bed. Like, and in that moment, it's really valuing, like, how do I want to perform? So if I'm thinking in those terms, that's what gets me to go do the thing, which I'm not necessarily as disciplined as people might think around some of those things. For me, it really is painting the hell of, I know what it's like to not feel my best the next day, to be working on 5 hours of sleep versus 7.5 or 8. Like, I notice the difference.
Yeah.
And the same thing when it comes to our lifestyle choices. I mean, sure, a lot of us like to have an alcoholic drink every now and again, right? But I know how I'm going to feel if that is a thing that I'm doing regularly during the week.
Well, I think like taking that, so Mike is so good, and like he will look at, the end of a Netflix show or whatever we're watching, and he's like, that's it, we're done. My toxic behavior trait is like, let's watch TV all night. Let's just stay up and fall asleep in front of the TV.
Yeah.
Like, and I know it's so bad, but I also know how easy it is for me to sabotage that. So we've even done activities with coaches and coach people through where you literally have to put what you think in ink. So everything he just said, like, line down the page, like, when I hydrate, because this is another really important habit, like, what happens when I have enough water? Well, I feel good. My digestion is good. I have bowel movements. What happens when you don't have enough water? I get really tired. My mouth gets dry. I wake up with cotton mouth. Like, that feels terrible. Some people have to literally see, like, putting what you think in ink enables us to make more logical choices rather than the emotional choices. Because my emotion, when we're like 2 episodes into a Netflix series, like I think we binged on House of Cards years ago, like literally 7 years ago. I was like, one more. What? I mean, it was like right before COVID. I don't even know, but I was like, more, like, they're literally 40 minutes for a reason. Like, you just want more of like that dopamine hit. It's like, if you can see though, this sleep is going to help me do this, or it's going to hurt me in this way. We can help ourselves get pulled out of that emotional state a little bit more and be more logical about all of the subtopics in this everything else and putting it all together, where people are like, huh, maybe it is worth just going to bed.
See, and where I thought this conversation was going to go more towards like exercise and what you guys think of exercise, the direction this is going is so much more powerful. And I realized such a gap in the way this to these people, like the mindset, that the reef so powerful. So I really appreciate that this is the direction that we're going in, because yeah, like sunlight's great. Yeah, grounding's awesome. Is grounding the thing that's gonna like put you, on the best health? Like probably not. It's probably a tiny little thing that you can add. But if you don't have the mindset, you're not gonna have any of that stuff. I love the direction you guys are taking this.
I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it's the most important thing. And
Yeah.
it's hard because when we're having conversations like this, or we run programs or trainings, or people are coming in for workouts, I mean, that's all like the ancillary stuff, right? That's all the stuff it's on the surface. It's easy to reach for. It's easy to talk about. But like when you dig into somebody's mindset, I mean, that's work on both our parts.
Yeah.
That's hard work. And that's why a lot of people don't do it. I mean, it's the hardest work they could possibly do, and they refuse to do it. And yet it's the most impactful thing that you're going to do.
Well, it's our education system is missing nutrition and finance, but you might get a little bit of that like interspersed in. There's absolutely nothing on the fact that there's this thing called plasticity in your brain, and you can actually change your thoughts. You can rewire your thinking. You can react to things differently. You can change patterns. You can completely abort old behaviors that didn't serve you and create completely new ones, like all on your own. There is literally nothing of that through, 12 to 16 years of education that we receive. So like it's one of the most important things. And for me, it was the most life-changing thing. In fact, when we first started dating, one of my mantras was FML, and it was the F bomb, my life. And in that period of time, it was 13 months of just all these terrible things kept happening. I mean, there was a car accident. I was physically assaulted by another woman, like horrible things. And it was my grandmother who was like, what you say is what you get. Like, it's literally biblical. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it was like that day, Casey, I was like, my new saying is, I believe all my dreams are coming true. I put it on my computer, post it. I put it in my bathroom. I put it in my phone. I had an alarm that went off on my phone. Like, I believe all my dreams are coming true. And it was like wildfire. We got engaged. We got married. We had a baby. We bought a house. Like, all of the things happened because I shifted my mindset about the state of my life, and like literally haven't looked back. Like, I would never say something so toxic like FML, but people walk around all day long. I'm a failure. I'm disgusting. I can't believe how fat I am. Like, we speak these energetic words over ourselves, or even worse, we think them and we hold them within ourselves. They reside in us, and they're literally like a toxic brain cancer that eats away at our potential and our ability to change and grow in life. So if we can get in and literally do some of that scrubbing in people's minds, like habits stick, people change, people realize like the way it's always been is not the way that it has to be. And that helped me change my life.
Well, Mike, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that. That was amazing. I certainly don't have anything to add after that. That was so well said, Corrie-Beth. Mike, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Absolutely not. That was a mic drop moment. I'm
It
just
was
gonna
so
leave
good.
that one for her.
It was so good. Well, you guys, like I said before, I really enjoyed talking with you. That was so fun to get your perspective on things. And again, that conversation turned in a direction that I wasn't expecting, which I really, really enjoyed. So thank you so very much for taking the time to be on the show and explain your opinions on things. Mike and Corrie-Beth, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
You can head on in over to purephysique.com. You can catch up with us there. And on podcasts, we are That Fitness Couple Podcast, where we've also had Casey as a guest. So definitely check it
All
out.
right. Thank you so much. Well, we'll be sure to tag all that in the notes. And like I said, it's such a joy to catch up with you guys. Let's make sure we do this again sometime in the future. But for now, thank you so very much for everything you do. And thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Thank you so much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.